You're listening to an Anazao Ministries podcast.
I mean, Joe sounds very ethereal, like he's a Jedi Force Ghost coming.
That's what both of you sound like.
Give me wisdom.
Yeah. Hey guys, this is Joshua. I am the producer of the show, and I played that for you so you could just hear. We had some audio problems this week, so I did my best to remove it from the rest of the clip. Just know there was some issues, but the content here is absolutely excellent, so it's worth hanging in there if you notice a couple of issues going forward. Thank you guys for your patience.
All right, you all voted, and we are here to deliver. It is that time of the month, once again, time for our monthly What If. And for today's festivities, I'm joined by a full house of hosts. My name is Joe Day. I am one of your hosts here, and we'll go one by one and introduce everybody. First off, Will, say what's up.
Hey, everybody. I'm super stoked to be here. I am a fan of What If comic books and alternate timelines and that kind of sandbox to play in to explore different kind of direction stories could take. And so I'm excited about today and today's topic and really excited to be here.
All right. I am Josh Rosengrant, the new kid on the block as regards this show, and I am a big Star Wars fan, appropriately for today, especially, and this turns some heads, and especially the prequels, but specifically the prequels as regards Clone Wars, not as regards the three movies that we don't talk about as much.
And like I said, I'm Joe. I love What If comic books. I love What If storylines, especially when you have something as expansive as Star Wars, where you can play a little bit, right? You can ask some questions, and you can play this game of What If. And specifically, this month, you guys voted on What If Qui Gon Jinn killed Darth Maul. And, you know, we know that Darth Maul, or that Qui-Gon is, Qui-Gon is this character that, you almost think of him in this way of like leaving the people wanting more, right? This is this character that had a single appearance in the movies. And of course it's Liam Neeson. He's an incredible actor. And so, let's dive into what that looks like if he doesn't die, but in turn kills Darth Maul. So, Will, I will let you kick us off. What if Qui-Gon Jinn killed Darth Maul?
Yeah, I agree. Qui-Gon, I think, again, Star Wars has this nature to it that the characters we know less about, we love, because there's a sense of mystery around it. Boba Fett and others, even in a sense of like Obi-Wan Kenobi talks about the Clone Wars and his master and those kind of things. You're like, I wonder what that's about. And so when Qui-Gon Jinn shows up in the prequels, I was like, whoa, I thought Obi-Wan Yoda was his master. What is this? Who's this other Jedi? And what's his story? So there's a sense of mystery to him in the prequels, and he alludes to like his backstory just a little bit and his understanding of the Force. He's definitely a mystic. He's definitely a little bit more monastic. There's the Jedi Order, there's a temple, there's an organized religion, the Jedi Code, that it seems like Obi-Wan Kenobi is a rule follower, but Qui-Gon's like, listen, let's just tap into the living Force and see what happens here. And that's what leads him to Anakin. So I think that's why he's a beloved character in this universe, and some fans their favorite Jedi, but because we don't know as much about him. So I love thinking about this, and I was talking with friend of the pod, Ryan Doze, about this question because he's a huge Qui-Gon Jinn fan, and we were batting back and forth, and we were talking about like there could be like a cliche answer of like, well, Qui-Gon doesn't die, he trains Anakin. Anakin never turns to the dark side, and they live happily ever after. But man, that just wouldn't be There's got to be more nuance to that story. So we already sense that he has this problem or a little bit of tension between him and the Jedi Order and the Jedi Council. And so what would it look like if he trained Anakin and they both were kind of underneath this umbrella or this kind of version of Jedi mysticism where they're like, I'm not going to buy into your Jedi code. I'm going to be more of a reformer. I'm not going to buy into like your organized religion. I know. The Lutheran pastor brings up a reformer. I'm not saying that Qui Gon Jinn is Martin Luther and Anakin is John Calvin or anything. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying like he has this sense of like he's not buying into the organized religion. So I think it would go down a road where, as he trained Anakin, it would be they not that they're going to create their own order or like a Gandalf the Grey or like whatever, like it's not black or white, but I don't think it's going to be a cliche answer of they just become a part of Jedi Council and they live happily after. So I'll start off there and I'll build off what other people think.
So that makes me instantly go for thinking of one thing: the idea of a gray Jedi. It doesn't come up much in the actual movies and things. I remember it being more of a Legends concept, at least as it stands now. But it's I think it's the cool idea, and I think it's what they were trying to do with Ahsoka in the original Clone Wars series, although they've certainly stepped away from that in her more modern appearances. But it's the concept of sort of a middle path that isn't the very strict Jedi religion of only using the light side of the Force, but it isn't the, use your anger and let it consume you side of the dark side. It's kind of a side where it's like you can use your emotions, you can use the dark side of the Force fueled by emotions, but you have to balance it with temperament of the light side. And it's always been, I think, my favorite interpretation of the Force. I've always found something kind of fascinating about kind of the push-pull, more Eastern religions that you kind of get, that kind of the Force ends up being a little bit more inspired by, I think. Yeah,
because Qui-Gon is really focused on the balance of the Force. That's what he really sees in Anakin. So what's going to bring balance to the Force? I mean, evidently, the Jedi Council and Order aren't seen very clearly because they can't see what's going on with the Sith and Palpatine and the puppet strings he's pulling. So what's blinding them from seeing the dark side emerging? And so what did he see in Anakin bring balance to the Force? And what would that look like if he was able to continue to train Anakin?
It would actually change the dynamics of the Jedi Order, because you would have Qui-Gon training Anakin. And then let's just go down this rabbit hole that he has trained him to follow him. And we already know that Anakin is not going to be dogmatic anyway, because of his disposition. But then you end up having more so another subset of the Jedi Order. It could be almost like monasticism. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to think of. There's like monasticism, where they are part of it, but they have their own thing, and they're following their own way. Because I believe with Qui-Gon training Anakin, it would then bring balance to the Force. And I'm under the suspicion that the Jedi Council would have, well, not the Council, but I believe that Anakin and Qui-Gon would have been able to discover the plots of the Sith if they would just continue their training as they would.
Are you guys familiar with the period of Star Wars history? I think it's called the 1,000-Year War. It was one of the first disputes between the Jedi and the Sith. And it was very much a difference of ideals. You've got this one group that is discovering that, the Force is, if you tap into it through these different emotions, they think it's stronger, all of those kinds of things. And then you have the Jedi that had been that look like the ancestors of what we know as the Jedi Knights and things like that. I'm inclined to go down this road that you guys are starting to go down, but I think it goes further down the road than that. I understand what you're saying as far as like having like a subsect, but I don't think that that's how it's going to sit, because you have this subgroup that stands eventually in opposition to the Jedi Council, right? Like, as we look at the prequel trilogy, we have this very clear picture that unfolds of the Jedi Council being the low-key bad guys. You know, the high-key bad guys, that's Palpatine, that's the Sith, so on and so forth. Like, clearly they are the antagonists of the story, but there really isn't much in the way of a hero per se, because the Jedi Council has fallen. You know, and I think if Qui-Gon survives, and he's the one that trains Anakin, I think that leads to a Jedi Civil War. I think that leads to this subgroup understanding that they are the ones that actually have an idea of what it means to obey the Force and to live in communion with the Force and all of those kinds of things. And then you have the more war-centric ideas of the Council. And I think it's the Council that starts the conflict. And this is when we see, in my headcanon, this is when we see a full-on shift, you know, almost like we end up in partially the same part of town, you know, that where the Council falls. And then you end up with kind of the history repeating itself of the Jedi becoming more
similar
like
to like
what
the Mandalorian, like what we saw in the Mandalorians. You see this break-off group where
Republic
one's
era
like pretty
and
like
all of that.
fundamentalist, where they even have in the upcoming season where that one Mandalorian's calling them like a cult because they're just way like never take your helmet off. And so you have this division between the two. I like the idea of like a Jedi Civil War where you have some are like, nope, this is the code. We're going to live by it. We're going to be fundamentalists by it. We're even going to have an Inquisition that's going to like quiz you on what is right or not. And then you have the other group who are more monastic or maybe more progressive or whatever. And they're going to kind of think. So I like this idea of Jedi Civil War, what that would look like. And maybe Palpatine's behind the scenes where he's trying to manipulate that side of it too, and see who he can pick off to join the dark side to have their own army or whatever.
See, I'll throw something spicy out there for you guys to unpack. I don't think Palpatine survives this. I don't think we see Palpatine continuing on, because if you think about it for a second, it's going to be a kind of a prolonged thing, right? This continued falling out between the two different sides of the Jedi and all of that you end up, you know, at first with what seems like a more united front, and then, you know, they shot their shot, right? They sent out Maul attacks, Maul gets killed. Well, the cat's out of the bag. You've rung that bell now. You know that the dark side exists. And so I think they are become a non-issue. And I think that you know, it's kind of that prolonged sense of peace that's going to give the perfect opportunity for the cracks in the armor to show, and the differences on how they process this whole thing to show. Because if you have a common enemy, then it's more united, right? That there's a distraction, if you will. But if there's no distraction, then suddenly the door is wide open for dissension to start to brew and things like that. And the one thing I'll push back against with what you said, Will, I don't think it's so much about reforming. I think it's about destroying the system.
Deconstruction. A complete deconstruction. Not reforming
what
the
is
system.
in the form of the council gets wiped out. And we go... Right.
See, I think you're right. I think in the end, I think both the Jedi Council and what remains of the Sith end up being completely wiped out in this scenario. I think what most likely that is going to happen is that since the Jedi and the Sith now are both fully aware of each other, excluding Palpatine's kind of cover, I think they end up destroying each other in some sense. Maybe one group, maybe the Jedi, successfully they have the numbers advantage, and so they actually do wipe out the Sith. Okay, great. Now they have no enemy, and if you look at it from the Force perspective, they have completely unbalanced the Force. So I think at that point, they leave themselves open to just either destroying themselves from the inside, or for what I'm just going to call like the gray center mass to just kind of overwhelm and take
and
over.
I think the Last Jedi tried to play with that a little bit, like kind of the gray
kind of the
aspect.
new Qui-Gon,
and, I have my thoughts about Last Jedi and what they did with Skywalker. But I think they were trying to go down that road a little bit. Whether they successfully did that or not is up for debate. But Kino, so where do you fall on the spectrum of total deconstruction or reform?
So hold on. So Joe, I gotta push back on. You're saying that Palpatine would be a non-factor in this, when Palpatine is the main factor in all of it. And yes, the Jedi are aware of the Sith because of Maul is out. However, Palpatine has been groomed to work in both systems at the same time to manipulate everything to in essence bring it about to his will. And I see that with the death of Maul and Qui-Gon living, Palpatine just finds another apprentice, but it won't be Dooku. It won't be Dooku. Now, Dooku will probably join still because of his distance with the Galactic Senate. Yes, but I don't think that Palpatine would make Dooku his apprentice. I think he would probably, master in the infighting that does happen, is sway a couple of Jedis to come over to his side.
So yeah, he definitely comes into play in some kind of scenario here with that. But yeah.
So I'll push back. The main reason why Palpatine's able to do what he does is because of the Jedi's hubris, because of their ego. Yes, he is a significant player, and he's smart and cunning and talented and all of these things, right? But I have to, and this is one of those areas where the way I process the world absolutely comes into play here with how I view this situation. If anybody has heard me preach, you know that one of the big things that I drive home is kingdom. I talk about that aspect of it. Josh brought it up, right? That there are aspects of this that reflect more Eastern religions. Crazy. The religion that we all practice is, in fact, an Eastern religion. So that's kind of where my mind goes. So I would be inclined to think in that sort of way about this whole thing. So to me, when I see something like the Jedi Council, right, I see egotism, I see the door wide open for somebody who is cunning, for somebody who is manipulative, to just move the pieces around, right? Now, if you have this other X Factor group that understands that emotions aren't inherently bad, but it's more of a bringing the totality of who you are, your existence, in line with this thing, they're no longer blinded by some ulterior motive, and they're able to see clearly, to the point where I think all of the political machinations and all of those kinds of things almost instantly become a non-factor.
Yeah, no. Only because the council in of itself is stuck on their ideals of we have to be the peacekeepers of anything that goes on in the galactic I want to say Senate Republic. Thank you Republic. And so because of their ideals, they miss that there are other things that go on in the world, in the Force, right, that they never picked up on. It was this hubris that they had because there's been peace for so long that they forgot that there's more to the Force than just staying on the light side. And so I'm still saying Palpatine was able to manipulate that through Plagueis because they understood how dogmatic the council was, that the stuff that they were doing in the Outer Rims never reached them until the Trade Federation happened, until the blockade. All the stuff that was happening prior to, they never noticed until the Trade Federation hit the blockade. And we're talking where, I'm saying Palpatine is still a big factor. Cause he has the influence. He has the money. He's been groomed for this, and he has the knowledge and he has science. I'm also saying that on the dark side, listen, they're embracing the Sith. The Sith embrace the science and willing to push the lever
Palpatine
into their favor.
You don't think that the Republic using clone troopers is embracing science?
That was Plagueis.
No, that's fair. It was.
That's Palpatine and Plagueis. That was them. So it was still them.
Yes, but at least nominally.
Yeah,
it
but
was
I
used
think
by the light side.
when you consider that they might have had ideals of thinking that they were peacekeepers, but they're so concentrated on this war and becoming war generals and things like that, that the opportunity just isn't there. All of these opportunities that we saw Palpatine execute on and be able to use in his favor, I'm saying don't happen. I'm saying at a grand sense, if Qui-Gon survives and this thing continues to unfold, I don't think that they stay blind as long as they do. I think they realize what exactly is happening, and by way of being clear to what is happening, take out Palpatine before he even becomes an issue and becomes this significant player in the whole thing. Like, at least to the point of, not getting as far as being signed complete and total power over the Senate and all of those kinds of things.
I see where you're going. It's just I'm not going down that road. but I do get that in this scenario we're ending up with Qui-Gon making an influence outside of the council that then which in turn influences the council to then recognize that, hey, we might miss some stuff, but I don't see that because of the ideals that the council has, that they feel they must uphold the responsibility of being on the council and keep the dogma and the rules and the rituals going, that they were unwilling to hear anything outside of that. And that was true when they refused to accept Anakin when they first met him. That they could have said, okay, we're going to give it a try, even though we might see some stuff. It's still ain't. It's not really fully known that we can influence it. But they said no,
totally, but just a little bit. Like,
he can't do it.
So do you think Qui-Gon's influence on Anakin is strong enough that even if Palpatine during that time was like, hey, because at the end of Phantom Menace, he's looking at little young Annie and saying, hey, we're going to keep our eye on you. In other words, like, I'm going to groom you. But like, with the father figure of Qui-Gon there for Anakin and not Obi-Wan, does Palpatine even have a chance to lure Anakin, the chosen one, to the dark side?
So I think Qui-Gon he's much more flexible. He's more bendable in what he was. As we've been discussing, he's kind of the gray aspect. So you have these very diametrically opposed sides. The absolute, almost monastic monks of the Jedi who are just, you'll basically not feel emotion, you will not make attachment, nah. And then you have the exact opposite side. You have the Sith, who are like, you are going to just pour all of yourself into your emotions, and that's all you are going to be. I think that what happens to Anakin, at least in a certain extent in the series, is he keeps being told by the Jedi he just can't, he can't have attachments, he can't have emotions. And eventually he decides that no, he's going to have them, and that that if he's going to flip, he has to just flip. There's no option. He just goes straight to the dark side. I think if he had the presence of a mentor like Qui-Gon, he wouldn't just run straight to the dark side, worrying about his things. He would be in a more he might shift away from like full whatever Jediism or whatever you want to call it. But I don't think he would go all the way to the Sith.
I think that's the secret sauce behind the whole thing, right? Because that tends to be the direct effect point. Whenever you talk about whether or not Qui-Gon survives, immediately you start talking about Anakin. And you see this continue ignoring of emotions. And your emotions are bad, right? And you have to focus on this thing. And if you have emotions, then you're corruptible and all of those kinds of things. I think Qui-Gon being there and showing him how to keep those things in check is exactly the path to him being the chosen one, to him doing these things. And maybe you get a little further down the road than just immediately shutting down Palpatine's machinations. But if you're talking about this X factor of Anakin being alive, being fully realized as the chosen one, understanding that there is a blending of these two worlds, it's all over but the children. Like it's done. Like there is no actual way that Palpatine can stand up against that. You know what I mean? Like I just think that if you're playing chess and you take enough of the pieces off of the board, it doesn't matter how good of a chess player you are.
That's why I love these what if exercises.
You're still gonna lose.
Kino's like,
you know what I mean?
He's trying to write that story in his head and it's not working.
Yeah, it's no. But okay. So if Anakin is not the chosen one only because, and this is the way I'm going around it. It's because he was created. Now, granted, he is the best. He had the highest reading of midichlorians ever. Yes, but he was created. He was created. He was the success of Plagueis. And so that manipulated the whole set of events that happened after that. Because now the Jedi Order...
Is that canon movie or is that
Qui-Gon believes that he is the chosen
stuff? Like he was created by the Force, but is
he was actually created?
Palpatine impregnated Shmi? Shmi.
So this is outside of canon. This is outside of canon. But it plays into the storyline of Palpatine talking to Anakin about Plagueis being able to manipulate the midichlorians.
Yeah, I mean, the comic book mentioned something along those lines, and like there's a suggestive panel that Palpatine used the Force to impregnate Shmi and so on and so forth. Yeah, I'll give it to you, Kino. That changes everything. If you are stating that Anakin is not the chosen one, then yeah, that probably takes a very significant piece off the table, in which case I would probably change my tune. But as far as I know, from a canon perspective, he is, which would also explain why Luke Skywalker was able to do what he was able to do, because when Anakin died, he inherited the chosen one status, air quotes.
Now, can I ask a question here?
Yes.
Is it possible that Anakin is the chosen one because, or he's in fact meant to destroy the Jedi Order? That is what he was chosen to do by A, Sidious, and B, the Force itself. Because we've talked a lot today about how the Jedi Order, in the sense it was at that time, had pretty much lost what it was supposed to be, and to borrow Will's thing, perhaps was in need of a bit of a reformation. So is it very possible that this was in some ways the best outcome, was to remove the Jedi Order, which if we're talking about balancing the Force, you have this huge Jedi Order.
Well, I
2.5 Sith.
Yeah, I would hope that the Force wouldn't like create.
It's like 2.5 men, but different,
to bring balance to the Force. Like I would
new
hope,
to Disney
like,
Plus this year. 2.5 Sith.
I think there's a better way to reform and deconstruct and do that than like thousands or millions of people dying, but or a Holocaust. But I see what you're saying. What if it's going to undo the misgivings of like the Jedi Code of being too rigid,
you could
and law? What if Qui-Gon lives? Then it's a different balance to it. So I don't know. Like
you could take.
Did the Force kill Qui-Gon, or did the dark side kill Qui-Gon?
You could take his. So you could take the original intent of Anakin's, chosenness was to dismantle the Jedi Council, but you can allow that with the Force being, kind of, not being, really evil, but if you assume that that's Palpatine's influence, is he's changing how Anakin goes about what he was always destined to do. He could always have been destined to destroy the Jedi Council, but rather than doing it in a peaceful way, like perhaps he would have with
that's
Qui-Gon,
why I like Joe's idea of like
the
a
absence of
civil war
Qui-Gon
between the
influence
Jedi.
of
Like
Palpatine,
I want that
goes down a full
story.
dark
I
side
want that
route,
movie.
and that's how he takes it.
Like, please, can I just please? I'm just a fan of lightsabers, so if we have like thousands of lightsabers battling in a civil war,
let's do that as an alternate timeline.
I like the word you choose, dismantle. Like, I don't go down the political baggage word of like defund the Jedi, but I think, but like there's this aspect of like how are we dismantling or deconstructing and reconstructing and building up a healthy way, and maybe that idea of Qui-Gon showing Anakin how to deal with his emotions in a healthy way rather than like going full thing like Joe was saying. And so then it makes me think about like, then okay, he does marry Padme, and they not only have the twins, but they have more kids, and then all of a sudden like Jedi all over the place are getting married and having kids, and you're like, what does that look like? So anyway, I love this exercise. I'm having fun in my head.
So Disney, for those of you that don't know, Disney has fallen into a habit that they started utilizing more literature to advance storylines, fill in holes, to shed more light on certain things like that. That's always, the literature has always been a significant part of Star Wars, but Disney has started relying on literary adaptations to tell more of the story. And one of the things that they recently did was they released the entirety of the Chosen One prophecy. And it's more than just this individual will restore balance to the Force. There are aspects of this that kind of, if you look at history, it kind of foretells of some of what happens. So I think it's interesting to ask that question, because if you look at the idea of something greater than, right, air quotes, and in this case, it's the Force. The Force works with a flawed creation that messes up, that, they make their own choices. They do these different things. And it's not that any of those choices kind of influence the Force, but it's the Force working despite the creation doing what it's doing. You know what I mean? So I think that there's a level of credence to be had to the conversation of, is the dismantling, to use that word, of what is established the inevitability, regardless? Because I think it's safe to say that even if Palpatine plays a significant part of it and still ends up being defeated, or if he's stopped dead in his tracks, we see the way that everything is situated. It's safe to say that that things need to change, right? Everybody's lost their way. The dark side's doing what it's doing. The Jedi Council's doing what it's doing, training people up to think a certain way, to act a certain way, all of those kinds of things. It stands to reason that the game board needs to be leveled, and I think that is exactly what happens if Qui-Gon survives. I think he and Anakin are the catalyst for that to happen. And maybe that was exactly what was supposed to happen the entire time. Maybe not in that way.
Right.
Maybe I don't know as though it plays out like, the Force purposefully put Palpatine in place and created this widespread genocide and all of that kind of. I don't think that's it.
I would hope not.
But I think but
no. So this is good because what we're establishing is the Force always wants balance. And no matter who is the part that it has to play, the Force is going to push to bring balance always. And so if we go down this vein and saying that if Qui-Gon survives and he trains Anakin and he's able to they are able to dismantle the order in such a way that it brings balance to the light side as it does to the dark side, then I agree with you on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the whole balance to the Force thing, it's very interesting because it could be done kind of two different ways. You would either have to assume that, or maybe three different ways, that each of the two orders, the Jedi and Sith order, could each find a way to individually be in balance with the Force. So there could either be some scenario in which each of them is in a separate balance and they both coexist, and perhaps that's possible, maybe. Or there's a version where either of them, removes the other and then makes their own balance, which is what the Jedi seemed to think was going to happen with the Chosen One. They thought he was just going to wipe out the Sith, and then balance is just the Jedi's existing. Or there's a third one where which I think is probably the most correct, where both the Jedi and the Sith have no idea what they're talking about, and that balance is somewhere in between them. I don't know. Thoughts?
Yeah. That's good.
I agree. I think that's the most plausible of the three options. I don't think either side has the beat on it. I don't think balance is these two subsects trying to live in harmony. Like, there is a nice message. There is something to be said for the underlying message of living in community and living in harmony and all of those kinds of things. But I think that this is where the roads diverge of us as Christians overlaying ideals onto the story and what is actually present in Star Wars. I think when we're talking about the Jedi or Force users, we'll say, since Jedi is kind of a term that we're using for the light side, I don't think either one of them individually is balance. I don't think those two together is balance. I think that beginning as a rogue group, being the combination of the light and dark, is the balance of the Force.
Yeah, it's like you put the light Jedi on one planet, and those who are on the dark side on another planet. Like, hey, you stay on your planet, I'll stay on mine. I don't know how that would work out, but yeah, the exploring of the balance of the Force, I think, is key here, and the Chosen One. It just really comes into play when you're thinking of Qui-Gon and Anakin, if he survives, and whether Obi-Wan was successful or not. I just like thinking that maybe Luke and Leia, there's a chance for them to have brothers and sisters, and what that looks like. That's what I like to think about. But that's what I'm taking away from this episode.
I just have to bring this up at this point. Do you all remember this thing that is still canon somehow, and I can't believe sometimes this is still canon. in the Clone Wars TV series, the planet of the Force.
Yeah.
Yep.
That, I think, actually has a lot to say about this particular conversation, because I think that really shows the call it gray Jedi idea being the correct interpretation of the Force, because it has this singular gray entity representing both sides of the Force acting as a moderator between his two children, the light side and the dark side. And a whole lot of that story is about the squabbling between the two, and about Anakin choosing between the two.
Yeah.
When he should have chose the father.
Maybe we can look that up real fast, but like, I don't know what season episode that is, but you make me want to go back and watch that.
I'm rewatching Clone Wars and I can't wait to get to it.
Yeah. I think I'm going to pull that up tonight. I've caught up on Andor, so I need some more Star Wars. So I think that's good.
But so the other issue is, and this is going into the same conversation, is that we are always considering the Jedi and the Sith the light and the dark side of the Force. They're just one entities of the Force on on different sides of the Force. There's always a middle ground, and I believe that Qui-Gon was trying to find the way outside of the Jedi Order to see balance. But for him, you have to let go of, which we already established, the dogma of the Jedi, that this is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to be peacemakers, all this other blah, 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 blah. No emotions, all that other stuff. But also, again, the other extreme of the Sith is that you fully embrace emotions, fully embrace how you feel, your sadness, all that fuel you. But we've learned, and Josh brought it up, that there's always a balance, but there's always fighting between the two. But no one seems to have tried to go to the middle, because everyone is vying for their own side, and that pushes, you have to decide, either you're for the Jedi or you're for the Sith, but there's no in between. But I believe that what is happening now, especially I believe they should have done it with Ahsoka's storyline, is that
that's really where they were building up to with all Clone Wars.
Yeah.
Right. Which was a good thing to show that there is still redemption and peace and balance, even if you're not a part of the Jedi Order.
It'll be interesting to see if they go down that road in her TV series, because it seems like she's still doing that. She still has a white lightsaber, or a lightsaber that has no particular color to it to choose size. But I sure
hope so.
I think they'll do that with her TV show. And Qui-Gon eventually does find balance so far. He's the first one to be the Force Ghost, right? He's the first documented Force Ghost. So in the other world, or he makes one with the Force, and then he's teaching others how to do that too. So it is pretty amazing that thousands of years of Force users, or hundreds of thousands of Force users in the Star Wars universe, Qui-Gon's the first one to come back as a blue ghost. I guess he found that middle ground. He found some balance there.
Yeah, I'm still salty about the fact that he came back as a Force Ghost in Obi-Wan. I'll say it. I'll be the one that says it.
I wanted to see it.
Don't get me wrong. Give him this.
I just felt like it felt awkward at that point. You could have done it better. Like, I agree. Like, I wanted to see it happen there. If you're ever going to do it, that's the show to do it. But then it was like, what just happened? Yeah.
Yeah, too much had already been established that he never got a body, like a bodily manifestation as a Force Ghost. And like, honestly, what would have been a better last line for that whole thing to really accentuate some of the themes in Obi-Wan is have a third person be like, who are you talking to? And it's a trauma response. It's not a Force Ghost. But that's a whole other conversation. But yeah, I mean, you're right. We have kind of laid these mantles of dark side, light side, and all of that on these particular groups. But I think even we'll always see like the sum total of a particular sect of a religion or of a practice kind of does fall on its practicers. Right? So if the chessboard is leveled, and then you have this group that has found balance and found harmony with the Force and all of those kinds of things, it kind of separates from, I mean, you could have people come along and say, you still have people who could pick that mantle back up, but then you kind of shut down the extremes and have the main practice of Force wielders be this in between, this gray. I think that if this actually is how it goes, then we don't necessarily even have the word Jedi anymore.
Do you think Qui-Gon shows up?
Completely.
Do you think Qui-Gon shows up in the Ahsoka series as it goes to kind of think about like this kind of
I
gray
doubt it,
area?
but I hope he does.
Man.
I think at first, when you look at the cartoon and you look at the original way that they wrote Ahsoka, right? It was this huge deal that Anakin was getting an apprentice. And then they started laying all of this gray Jedi stuff onto her. And then they ultimately didn't end up paying it off. But, they kind of were building her to be that. So maybe the first time around, sure, I'd buy that for $1. But I think now, no, I don't think that I think they've proven that there's novelty in the voice of Ahsoka, but I don't think they'll take it seriously enough to really press forward with giving her the storyline of becoming the first Grey Jedi.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm afraid of. Like, Ahsoka, as in Clone Wars, was great, and like her character arc was just fantastic. It was believable. It was the learning into the Grey Jedi ideas, and then in every depiction since, she's slowly drifted towards just being the Jedi. She's just one of the Jedi now. She's just she's just Luke 2. Like, okay, cool.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And for those of you that were wondering, the references that we were making for Clone Wars episodes are Voices, Destiny, and Sacrifice. That's the one. Those are the three. Yep. They are in the 6th season of the Clone Wars.
And
that's the first time that we see the Force Planet and all of that.
Nice.
So we've unpacked these things. Any last seasoning that y'all want to throw on to this? Anything else to be considered? We'll start with you, Kino. Which we know that they are.
Yes.
Of course, yeah.
Do what if scenarios in Star Wars, and you could milk it for all it's worth, because we will watch it regardless if we bitch and moan. Forgive my language.
Yeah, just true though. We will complain the entire time, but we'll us nerds will absolutely dig on that.
Yeah,
just
I saw
the entire
meme the other day
today.
that called it the fandom menace is getting ready to troll the Andor message board. So they call it the fandom menace. And I was like, heck yeah, man. That is right. Fantastic. So yeah, the fandom menace is going to be all over with it. But I agree with Kino. Like, let's get those out.
No, just make an entire TV series just based off of this episode that we've recorded today. Just all of just this specific what if. Yeah. That's an initial timeline change.
You don't even have to pay me. You just let me get in the Galaxy's Edge for free. If you can let me go to Galaxy's Edge for free, that's all.
Time passes to Galaxy's Edge.
And
there you go.
You can have my story idea.
All right, Josh, you're up.
Okay. So one thing, real quick, you were talking earlier about Ahsoka's lightsabers. If memory serves, they're actually some of the red lights. She's using white lightsabers, and they're actually red lightsabers that she has healed.
Oh.
If anybody wants to think on that one. Another aspect of her turning the dark to light, perhaps, somewhere in the middle. But no, other than that, I think I'm pretty much good, because the only other thing I want to talk about is adding into this conversation the fact that Jar Jar's the Sith Lord, and I don't think we have time for that one.
Wait! Hold on. Wait a minute.
Oh no.
I don't know how much time we got, but I'm gonna take 30 seconds. I gotta say this real quick. So a friend of mine who refused to watch Star Wars, I finally got him to watch Star Wars, and he watched everything. He finally watched all the movies, Clone Wars, all this stuff, right? He said, once he got in, he said, you know what? I seen a video that Jar Jar Binks is a Sith Lord. I said, no, he's not. No, he's not. He is not. Jar Jar, don't do that to me. However, after I have went down some legend material, I can see that. And I'm saying to you guys that are listening, please up. Let's do a what if Jar Jar Binks is a Sith Lord.
Yes.
Listen, we could that could work. That could work. Just saying. All right, that's my time.
Oh man.
All right, Will.
Yeah. I just love going down that road and think again, Star Wars teases us with whether it's a line or a mysterious character that we want to unpack in our own headcanon. We like fill in their backstory and those kind of things. And it's when they actually do those stories, we're like, oh man, I would have done it this way. So the reason we love Qui Gon so much because he was only in one movie and they unpacked that some. So I don't know but there are some books. I think Master and Apprentice is a book that they had for him, and he did some work in, or actually some of his backstories in the Marvel comic, the Age of the Republic. And then with this upcoming Tales of the Jedi cartoon series, there was an appearance in the trailer of Qui-Gon and Count Dooku having a conversation. So they and these little short stories, animated stories, they may fill in his story too. So we'll see what happens. And again, what if? That's fun.
Yeah. And I'll close this off with, these are the kinds of conversations that are fun to have because it's people diving into a fandom that they love that's expansive enough to hold the water of what ifs, right? There's enough meat on the bone. There's the universe is lived in enough to be able to have compelling enough characters to ask these questions and to go there and all of that. And so have some fun and explore this universe of Star Wars because it's bigger than just any of the trilogies, right? It's bigger than the 9 movies. We've referenced it a couple of times, but I'll go ahead and give my recommendation right here and now. Go dive into Legends continuity.
Yeah.
Legends continuity, that is my Star Wars. Outside of the original 3, Star Wars Legends is where it's at for me. And so because they tell stories, they explore the boundaries of the universe and things like that. And there's even ones flavored for people who like the original 3 with like Dark Empire and Jedi Academy and stuff like that. So dive into some of these areas and allow for the storytelling to sweep you up to the point of asking these sorts of questions. All right. So thank you all for joining me on another awesome time asking the question of what if. And as always, as we head into the wrap up, let's go ahead and kick into some recommendations. This time, Will, I'll let you go first. What recommendations do you have for the people?
Yeah, I think Kino referenced it a few times, but the novel, I think I don't know if it's canon or under Legends, but the Darth Plagueis novel is pretty good, a prequel to the prequels. It kind of builds up Palpatine's rise and how and then Andor. I just got finished watching the first 3 episodes of Andor, and I love it. I like it, and go watch it. It's a Star Wars show grounded in the Star Wars universe, but it's different from the other Disney Plus episodic TV shows, and I find it refreshing and fun. So
I need to start that.
Yeah,
definitely.
All right, Josh.
All right. So now this is completely off the topic of Star Wars for my recommendation today.
Yeah.
Although it does maintain the aspect of space. If you like space, if you like, role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons and stuff, you really should try out the new Dungeons and Dragons thing, Spelljammer. And of course, as most things are, it's a resurrection of an old Dungeons and Dragons thing. But it's basically magical space D&D. It's really cool.
Nice.
It's called
that sounds fun.
Spelljammer?
Spelljammer, yeah.
Spelljammer, cool.
It's the name of their magical ships that take them through space, although it's not quite space. But
Nice.
That could be an episode unto itself.
Nice. All right, Kino.
Just like with Josh, I'm gonna take you off, and I'm going to plug what TJ told me last time I was on with him, and it is Cyberpunk.
Yeah.
It's good. It's real good. I was surprised. The Cyberpunk is real good. First episode grabbed me. I'm almost in. I'm almost done. Can't wait to get back to it.
Yeah. That's fun. Yeah, I tried the first episode because I was on that episode where TJ suggested that, and I don't have the same opinion, but I'm glad you enjoyed it.
We're going to leave it right there. That's fine. That's fine.
The circus tent is wide.
It is. It's always fun when you can see the different angles of what brings people to the yard. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. What people enjoy and all that. I know I gave the recommendation of Legends continuity, but I'll give one more. If you are a fan of Star Wars, and as Sari so eloquently put when she was on with Josh and I, if you enjoy asking questions of ethics, if you enjoy asking questions of humanity, and you like sci-fi, check out Star Trek. There's a million on-ramps for it. I think probably the most palatable for most people will be either TNG or DS9, Deep Space Nine. Yeah, I think either one of those is a good shout, but really there is no wrong answer when it comes to finding what your on-ramp is for that.
What if your on-ramp is the J.J. Abrams reboot movies, Joe?
Then that means that, you have bad taste, but hey, if it works for you, do that.
It's my favorite because it's more like Star Wars. Yeah, Sarah,
you got to go with the original Star Trek the motion picture.
Ah, there you go.
That is good.
All right, and so with that, thank you for joining us for another episode of What If. If you have listened to this and you have realized, man, I want to hear more from these lovely gentlemen, you can head on over to systematicgeekology.org, binge our back catalog of episodes. There's about a year's worth of content there for your ear holes to listen to. And if you have binged all of that and you find yourself just absolutely wanting more, then you can head on over to patreon.com/systematicgeekology, where you can find all sorts of bonus materials over there and the pleasure of knowing that you've helped us keep the lights on. Until next time, friends, remember that we are all a chosen people, a geekdom of priests.
This was an Anazao Ministries podcast. If you enjoyed this show and would like to learn more about our network, be sure to check out the Anazao Ministries podcast network.